Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd like to take roll call to establish our quorum. And Addie, if you would respond.
Here.
Bill?
Bill Casella is present.
Todd?
Comment 2 is also here.
Good, and we have met quorum. Now I'd like to go to agenda item number 2 for any public comment for items not on the agenda. Okay, what we'd like to do is, for the sake of, we have a connection with the report. We'd like to skip agenda item number 3 and go into agenda item number 4. We will come back to agenda item number 3, but agenda item 4 is the fund budget analysis, and I'd like to see if the committee has any comments, any questions about what they see on agenda item number 4. Any questions?
So, Ruby, we have a representative from the budget office who's going to make a presentation to kind of go over the budget process for you.
Okay.
And then he can explain what it is that you're looking at.
Okay.
You all ready?
Yes. Wilbert? Here. We tested this before.
We can hear you.
Okay. So Wilbur, if you could please go over the 2 documents that you provided, the budget process overview and then the simplified version of the budget process. That's the simplified version. So if you could go over this one. Can you see it? The annual budget process, this one. Can you go over those 2 before we go over the expenditure report?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Wilbur Ramona, and I'm going to be doing the budget process overview. A couple of things that we're going to discuss is I'm just going to do a high-level overview of the budget process. I know the flow chart in front of you has a lot of steps in it, but main thing is I'm just going to go over the items that go into the budget process and how your budget is created. So first thing is we always go by fiscal year. Fiscal year starts from July to June of each fiscal year. So in the process, at this point in time, we are starting off with the 2017 Budget Act. And from there, from a fund condition standpoint, you have your starting budget, which is typically called your appropriation. And from that point in your appropriation, we incorporate any budget letters, executive orders, any retirement rate changes, employee comp changes, and any budget change proposals into your budget. So based on where we have you starting in the Budget Act, all those changes will determine how your budget is going to be created. And then through the timeline each year, I think you guys have the budget process overview.
Yes.
I'm going to move on to the budget process overview from the annual budget process. Now let me know if I'm going to fast or anyone. So a couple of the things that I discussed is the budget change proposals. So one of the first thing that we start on for the year is budget change proposals, which are typically submitted in July. And we work in concordance with the Business, Consumer Services and Housing Agency and Department of Finance. And when a budget change proposal is submitted, we work with those control agencies to determine if and what is the need for your program based on the BCP that's submitted by the board. One of the things that we do is we review the fiscal aspect of it and the policy aspect of how it's going to affect the program. And at this point, we will be talking about the RDO program. Second part of that is typically after budget change proposals, we do items called a workload and revenue and Schedule 9 equipment. So what we do is we talk with the program and we have them submit their revenue report, and it helps us project the amount of revenue that the board will be collecting through the year. And so it looks like RDO went through a fee increase at the end of the last fiscal year, so there's a significant jump in revenue for the RDO program. And during that time, and in concurrence at the same time as the budget change proposal, we received budget letters, and the budget letters talk about the employee comp drills, the retirement drills, and the most recently we had the increase to state workers' pay to the unit. There was a 4% adjustment that was made for all state workers dependent on your bargaining unit. So all those changes will be incorporated into your budget. And that is how we're going to be coming out with your budget for the government budget in January 2018. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Nope.
No? I'm going to move on to the expenditure report, which is attachment 2. So I'll be doing an overview of the expenditures for fiscal year 16-17, which is last fiscal year. So the board's appropriation, the RDO program appropriation was $311,000, and of that $311,000, the board had only spent $173,000. So the board had reverted $147,000 total, meaning that's how much you saved last year. And just to go over it a little bit, this might be foreign to some of you that have seen this for the first time. I am going to go over that with you guys in a little bit more detail. If you look at the first, technically the second column under fiscal year 2015-16, when it says actual expenditures for month 13, those were the expenditures for the RDO program for fiscal year 15-16. And if you look at the next column that says budget stone 2016-17, that's the appropriation that you have for this fiscal year, for last fiscal year. That's your budget basically. The expenditures, the next column, the current year expenditures as of 6/30, that's the amount that you had spent for that current year. And then the percentages are based off of what you had spent compared to what your actual appropriation was for that particular line item, meaning general expense, you spent 11% of your budget. So at the bottom,
Sorry, this is Khan Matu. 2016-17 ended at the end of July, correct? So
June 30th.
June 30th. Sorry. So we had an additional 146,000 in surplus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So the board reverted, meaning they saved $147,000 for that fiscal year.
And that goes back to the general fund, or it just stays as a carry over for the following year?
It technically goes as a carryover for the following year. It stays in the RDO fund.
Okay.
Hey, Wilbur, would you mind telling
the
them?
RDO program as its own fund within the state, and that I guess I can talk about the difference between the fund and the appropriation.
Completely different.
So the appropriation is what the RDO program is allowed to spend each fiscal year. So through the process, the annual budget building process, as I explained, the budget change proposal, the executive orders, as those are incorporated into your budget, that will be your starting point. And then whatever is left over is transferred into the fund. So the fund and the appropriation, the fund is kind of like your savings account for the RDO program. And you can see that on the fund condition when we get there, which is the next slide. But if you have any more questions on the expenditure report, I'd be glad to address that.
Okay.
I'm going to move to the fund condition then at this point. Okay, what I was addressing. So if you look at the actual for fiscal year 2016-17, in the expenditures, it shows that you spent $164,000, and that is accounting for all the reimbursements that the board had. So on the expenditure, you have expended $173,000, but after reimbursement, the total that the board spent was $164,000. So, for fiscal year 17-18, which is our current year, the beginning budget for the RDO program is $393,000. And you see that in the column, and that will be your beginning budget for the fiscal year. And so you can see the difference where the amount in your appropriation will be into your fund, and we give you a new starting budget for the fiscal year. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the $393,000 that has been budgeted. Does that also include, let's say, we're in discussion, our next topic, would it include any sort of projects we're working on, or is it just administrative? What exactly does that mean?
That covers all the personnel services and the operating equipment and expenses. So at this point in time, we are at the 2017 Budget Act, which is what we're starting. And so since we're at the beginning of the budget building process, after we incorporate, the budget letters and retirement drills, employee comp, and any executive orders, this number is this 393 is going to change on January 1st, 2018 on the release of the government budget.
Thank you.
And Wilbur, this is comment too again. The increase in the expenditures, is that just due to the fact that the RDO is doing much more work this year? Is that correct?
That's one of the attributing factors. The other attributing factors is along with base services, retirement rates increase, employee salaries increase. Again, there was a 4% increase for most workers,
right?
In the last fiscal year, and that's being incorporated from the contract into your fund.
I mean, it's just almost it's more than double previous year's actual. So I'm just I'm just trying to figure out what we're talking about.
So, initially your budget was $311,000 for last year.
Oh,
So that initial increase of $82,000 at this point is attributed to the rising costs of retirement, employee comp, workman comp, and employee salaries.
Okay.
And along with the work that the RDO program is undertaking.
So the budget increase is only 80,000, and we hadn't caught up
At
to
this point
previous
it
years.
is. Keep in mind, it's the beginning of the budget cycle, so that number is going to change. It will increase again by January 1st, 2018. So this is our starting point, because we're still working with the Department of Finance on incorporating the new rates for this fiscal year.
So, and also for 16-17, because it's possible that you have a budget and the amount in your budget is either more or less than what your fund actually supports. So if you have a higher amount in your fund, that doesn't mean you can spend everything in your fund. And if your budget, like with the RDO program, the budget was actually a much larger amount than what the fund could actually sustain. So when you see the expenditures are much lower, is because we had to do immediate cost savings, so we wouldn't drain the fund out. So before, Wilbert, can you scroll up so we can see the bottom, the reserves? I don't think you can hear me. Can you ask him to scroll up?
would you scroll up so we can see what is on reserves?
Nope.
I think he's trying. It hasn't. Have you? Yeah. I think he-
There.
Yeah.
Okay, so see these are the months in reserve: 7.8, 9.5, 11.1, and Bill, you might remember what it used to look like. It was in the negatives. It was projected in the negative. And so when we do the fee increase as part of the trailer bill, the governor's office helped us get the fee increase through. That's why you're seeing a steady increase in reserves there. But it's possible. So when you look at the budget and he says that we reverted over $100,000, it's because we didn't have the money actually in our fund to do that.
Right.
So I just wanted to.
But for next year, it will be what will
Project.
the pie, so to speak, is going to be the reserves plus the appropriation.
Right.
So now, finally, if we programmatically could spend our $393,000 budgeting, we would have the resources to do it,
Right.
where we couldn't have done that last year.
Right.
Okay. So we have money to play with a little
Just, yeah.
in terms of like
Well,
the items that we were talking about
Well, if
in the future on our agenda.
yeah, so if it's within the budget, so it also has to stay within the budget amount, and we also look to make sure that we're not spending more than what we're bringing in.
Right.
So we have much more than we did before, but we're still just building the fund up. So yeah.
And you'll tell us when we're doing too much and we have to slow down.
Right.
Yeah, so, and that's another thing I think I put on the cover memo. The RDO program doesn't have a specified statutory limit for the months in reserve, like the Board of Optometry has 6 months. So since we don't have our own, it goes back to the general B&P, which is 24 months in reserve. So we're not at the 24 months, so we still have a while to go before we reach that.
Is that something we can create, as in to have that months in reserve? Is that something that we can put in?
So hopefully this will keep building
Right.
to be able to get that good reserve account.
Right.
But once it goes over that, we'll have to look at, if it goes over that, we have to look at decreasing fees.
So it's not a problem now.
Right.
And
But it
it's
could-
probably, for us, given that we want to get the ship going in the
Right.
right course, it's good that it's 24 months because
Yes.
we'll never achieve that in
Because
the
we're gonna be
short
spending
term.
Right.
And so that'll allow us to
Yeah.
spend all our
Yeah.
resources to
Right.
do what we have to do. Then once we're on the right course, then
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so the fee increase has helped quite a bit with this.
Oh yeah, that righted the ship for us.
So if there is a item that we want to spend in 2018, 2019, do we want to build it in currently, say, I don't know, a study, is that something we want to build in, or do we want to spend that out of our reserves?
So
I'm assuming if we spend it out of our reserves, we don't have to build it in. We have more control over it. But if we're trying to plan ahead,
well, we can't just spend out of the reserves. It has
Okay.
to be within the budget. In order to get money out of the reserve, and we have to go through the whole process
Okay.
to change the budget.
right?
But Wilbert, I think what Con is getting at is the occupational analysis and linkage study. So would you be able to go over what our recommendation is as far as when to implement that, what part we can absorb or not absorb, and then proceed with the BCP for for the next cycle, which starts in April?
Yeah, so I can go over that as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so based on the discussion that in regards to the occupational analysis that are needed for the Board of Optometry, as you guys can see, the board did reverse a lot of money last fiscal year, and in this upcoming cycle, we will provide these reports on a either quarterly basis or whenever you guys need to see it, in order to know what you guys have spent and will be spending. So, in regards to the occupational analysis, based on the discussion that Jessica and I had, it looks like the board will be able to absorb one of the occupational analyses, but the board is going to be very tight. I'm going to have to monitor the expenditure very closely because, a lot of that was due to salary savings too. So I know Jessica will be hiring another person to fill those vacant positions. So at the same time, this reversion that you have for this year will probably not be the same if you guys absorb the cost of one of the OAs for next fiscal year. Because at this point in time, they're asking for budget change proposal has already passed, and those are already pending at the Department of Finance. So our suggestion would be to absorb the cost of one OA, and then for the other occupational analysis, I would submit a budget change proposal in next fiscal year in July of 2018, and then that, hopefully you'd be able to push that process out at least one more year, because the budget change proposal may or may not be approved for the next fiscal year, for 1920.
So, Wilbert, I have to move in here so you can hear me. To absorb that first occupational analysis, that alone would make the budget pretty tight, right? For this fiscal year, if we were to absorb it.
That's for fiscal year 17-18.
Okay, and so if I were to hire someone, because we have cost savings now because we have a vacancy, but if I hire someone, that makes it pretty close, like like uncomfortably close for me to absorb it. So would it be, and this is another thing that I don't know if you guys know, but if we go over the budget, it comes out of my salary, my personal salary, so I'd rather not do that. I recommend to not absorb the cost right now because we're going to hire a person and then we could go over. But if we do either both or one of the occupational analysis next, once we get a BCP approved, and then address it that way so we're not so uncomfortably close to where the budget is. What do you think, Wilbert?
If you're going to be hiring an FSA and absorbing the cost of I'm assuming it's a spectacle lens dispenser, one of those?
Yeah. Whatever, was it the spectacle lens that you're more concerned about, the ABO?
Yes.
Yes, well, so we'd absorb one of them.
It would be actually the NCLE.
So that's the one you're,
Yes.
The one we're concerned about is the NCLE, but they're the same cost. So if we absorb one and hire a person,
What's an SSA?
staff service analyst,
And who's doing that currently? It's
The
falling on the
enforcement
board.
team on the optometry side is absorbing it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so what happens if we absorb the one OA now and hire an individual?
So I ran the scenario for 17-18, and at this point in time, if that's the case, the board would be reverting less than $10,000.
But
At
still,
this point in time,
reverting.
because
Right.
keep in mind that might change as of January. But at this point in time, if you're absorbing the cost of that one of the OA, which is, I think the total cost is just a little over $80,000.
Yeah.
And then hiring that person, the board is going to be really tight. So I'm going to be monitoring all your expenditures and don't overexpend our appropriation for this fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I don't know if that's something that Jessica and the committee is comfortable with, but as long as we, stick to a plan, based on my scenario, you guys would be reverting just a little under $10,000, which is really close.
And
But if there's anything that comes up unexpectedly, we might have to discuss options about how we can hold off on certain purchases.
Right, but in context, I'm guessing putting on one of these meetings wherever we do it is like a $10,000 jump.
It's a good amount. I don't know. I think we're saving costs for this meeting because this meeting room is free. So
Right.
it's when we have to pay for a room that it
Right.
is costly.
But so that margin is like
Really tight.
when it comes down to maybe not having
an additional.
an additional meeting, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Big. Sorry.
Well, my question is, we're looking at the NCLE and doing that study. In the future, though, wouldn't that, if we were to come up with a test here in California, wouldn't that bring in additional fees that now we're testing applicants on that? Let's just say we're at the end of it and we say, okay, I'm not saying it will go there, but isn't that analysis to help us figure out that we're going to even bring in more income?
Not to bring in income.
Okay. Or additional fees, I should say, or.
Well, and whatever, because we're a special funded agency, so we're not for profit, so we can't make any above our operational costs. So whatever costs would associate, the committee and the board decided, we're not going to do national exams, we're just going to do our own exam. Whatever costs, there would be a fee for that, but it would only be cover those costs, not to make revenue to do it. Yeah.
What, Wilbur, in your analysis in January, what is that usual change? Like, would it go over that 10? Are you already accounting for the change in January when you're saying we would only revert 10,000 back, or is that
I am not.
okay?
I can't include January because I don't know those numbers yet, because we still have to run those through the Department of Finance, and we're currently incorporating them into your 393,000. So it will change, but I don't know the exact number yet. So
Would
at this
it?
point, I'm only basing it off of the 393,000 and not what how the budget will change.
Right. I'm just trying to figure. If we're in my head, I'm trying to just balance. Is it possible to get the study done, hire the person, and not dip into Jessica's salary?
It only get you so far. I mean, it might give you like a couple days. But
So I'm just trying. I don't want to get so close. If there's a revision in January that suddenly we are not going, we're going to have to pay, go over that 10,000 that you are estimating that we would have in reserve to give back. So in your in historical times, what is that change usually? Do you see in January?
So it's all based on, there's a couple things that go to this. Statewide pro rata, there's employee salary, and then there's the cost of doing business, meaning all the contracts that you guys will be pursuing throughout the year. So as I look at your fund condition, as I look at it, it looks like most of the expenses, besides pro rata, come out of the attorney AG's office. And so I don't know the reason being for increase in RDO tips, but the good news is if there is an overage in the AG expenses, there is budget bill language that covers any health healing arts programs for up to $200,000 for attorney general costs and $50,000 for OAH costs. It's called a budget bill augmentation, and for any of those enforcement related cases, there is language that helps healing arts programs to pursue cases, and that way we ensure that they just don't stop pursuing enforcement cases.
So is the DOC line item different than the Board of Optometry line item, such that if there's an AG overage, each board is entitled to up to the $200,000?
Yeah.
Each fund. That's my fund. Got it.
It requires legislative approval if it's over $200,000 or over $50,000. This is strictly for the RDO program.
Right. So.
But if it's over that amount, it requires legislative approval. And we have done that with healing arts programs before, because you're considered healing arts program. You would be covered under that language as a registered dispensing optician program.
Right. And to this point, we do significantly less enforcement than optometry, for example. And I imagine pretty much many others. So that shouldn't be a risk.
Yeah, optometry would be a separate fund, even though RDO is under optometry. Optometry, if there was a case for optometry, they would pursue their own, and it wouldn't be part of RDO.
And if we don't use the budgeted amount of AG services, does that just revert to the fund generally, or during the same fiscal year, can those resources be used for other purposes?
So what we do is we care about bottom line budgeting. So there are some instances where the program will expend in one line item, overexpend in one line item, but then underexpend in another line item. So
right. So
what we care about is bottom line budgeting. So I mean, technically, yes, the program will do that.
So we're concerned about this cutting it close with $10,000, which means we're actually planning well. But that's assuming we're being charged the full amount by the Attorney General for a full service on enforcement, which may or may not happen depending on how up to speed we are in putting our enforcement program in place.
So it's in the budgeted amount on the expenditure report. It'll show you what's been budgeted for the AG's office.
Right, but if $500,000 has been budgeted for the AG's office, but because we're not kind of up to speed, given the transition and the whole enforcement, I could imagine that the AG's office might spend between $0 and $50,000 on RDO enforcement cases this year, which now all of a sudden would be 450 would be left over, which in the bottom line budgeting could be used for other purposes. And so I guess the question is, like, realistically, what do we think our expenses from the AG are going to be, since that's the big item?
Well, it looks like, I mean, we spent 91% of that. It's 50,000 as for last year's, right?
Yeah.
And we spent 45. I'm assuming that's just salary, right?
It's all AG expenses, so hearings.
Coming to our meetings and so forth.
They
Yeah.
bill hourly,
Right.
right?
Yeah, they.
So she's costing us right now,
It's
is
not
what we're
me, I'm
saying.
not-
No, she's not from the AG's office. In pro rata, that's a different line item.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She's actually even more expensive. Just
Right.
FYI.
Right, but,
I don't bill hourly.
but so that's the question is, for next year, what's the budget amount?
What we actually don't have is the budget for 2017, 2018. We have 15, 16, 16, 17, but not the current year.
Right, and it's
In
the
the
current
breakdown.
year that we're going to be on the
For
$10,000 margin.
2018, we do. It's 393 at this time. So once the government budget comes out for 17 and 18, 19, those numbers are going to change based on the drills and the executive orders and budget letters that we work on. So those numbers are going to change. So you'll have a new beginning budget as of 17, 18, and then 18, 19, once we input all the documents and submit the finance, you'll technically have the budget for 2 fiscal years.
Right.
So we usually do it a year in advance is how we do it each fiscal year.
So my point is that if that $50,000 based on the new budget becomes $100,000, but we spend the same amount, then all of a sudden we'd have $55,000 potentially to offset that $10,000 margin, given the bottom line budget.
Yes.
And do we anticipate?
Technically, that would be the case.
Right. Do we anticipate that Attorney General number is going up?
Yeah,
It's not going to be 50,000.
it's not going to go down.
Right. And then do we anticipate using more of their services in that fiscal year?
Yes.
Significantly.
I don't submit it. I can tell you it's going to be more.
It's going to be about the same as we have
So
budgeted.
it's
We're not
still-
going to go over that budget, basically. What?
No, it's still going to be,
Right, whatever
we're
it
going to
is.
spend 90% or
Right.
pretty close
Yes.
to that number.
Yeah.
But again, in the context of the 16-17 budget, that would be, an extra
5,000.
$4,000 that we'd have to add to that 10,000 in
Right.
the window.
So we have a little play.
So there's $10,000 is cutting it close, and you can monitor it and hold us to it. But theoretically there could be a little here and there if it came down to that.
Because
Yes, and keep in mind that also mechanism, so if you guys will be submitting a budget change proposal for the occupational analysis, and based on the history of the Attorney General, you could potentially make an augmentation for that as well, an Attorney General augmentation, because historically at this point, from what I see, we went from $27,000 in 15-16 to $46 in 16, and you anticipate the cost to increase again to submit a budget change proposal in order to increase that budget. But if that's not approved, at the same time, again, you have that budget bill language that helps you in the immediate future.
Right.
So we'll talk in the context of a different agenda item about saying, yes, that's the approach we
Right.
want to take.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry, I know I skipped ahead, but I just wanted to
Yeah,
understand
but
what
that's the big-
what
that's
planning
the
we can
issue.
make. Because I know the recommendation, future agenda item, whatever, is for it to do it 18, 19, and then 19,
Yeah. it's good.
19, 20,
Yeah.
right? So I was just trying to figure out, can we actually do it sooner since we want to get rolling?
Exactly.
Thank you. Sorry, Robert.
Thank you very much. That's great. So, do we have any further comments from? And do we have any comments from the public? All right, we can now then move on to our next agenda item, which we're also going to get a report. That is agenda item number 8. And that has to do with the occupational analysis that we were talking about in this budget. So, Rob has that for us.
Can you ask Rob if Amy is there? Amy from OPES?
Is Amy? Is,
Okay.
oh, okay. Yes, she's there now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Amy Welch-Gandy, Office of Professional Examination Service, and I'm going to be going over some information, give you more information about occupational analyses and audit, national exam audit. So our mission statement is to protect interests of consumers by supporting the Department of Consumer Affairs and its regulatory entities in their commitment to establish and maintain licensure examination programs that are fair, valid, and legally defensible. And services that we provide, we perform all aspects of the licensure validation process, which of course include occupational analysis, examination development, test scoring and statistical item analysis, national examination review. We also oversee the department's master contract for computer-based administration, and computer-based testing program with Cisco and Take Verification. And we also provide the report to the legislature required by Business and Professions Code Section 139. And that report is an annual report of all the DCA boards, bureaus, and committees of their exam programs that they're following the standards and adhering to fair, valid, legally defensible exams. Our clients, here are some of our clients. We have, let me look at my cheat sheet. I believe we have 21 clients currently, developed 47 examinations. So we work with quite a few of the DCA boards, bureaus, and committees. So how does OPES ensure the validity of licensure examinations? We provide services based on legal mandates and professional standards, which I'm going to go over in the next few slides. And we also maintain an objective perspective. So we're the department's independent consultant for examination development and occupational analysis. So two of the main legal mandates that we follow for examination development, the first one is the Government Section 12944, and that addresses that licensure examinations are related. We also follow Business and Professions Code Section 139. That addresses the fact that occupational analyses and validation studies are fundamental components of life examination. For Business and 139, each year our office submits a report to the legislature notifying them that all of the DCA programs are meeting professional standards, they're being evaluated regularly, and that's all included in the report. The professional standards we follow are the standards for education and psychological testing, principles for validation and use of personal selection procedures, and the uniform for employee, on employee selection procedures. These standards explicitly state that in order to have a legally defensible examination, you must provide evidence that tests are linked to what licensees are actually doing on the job. And that's where the occupational analysis comes into play. So what is an occupational analysis? It's a study of a profession. It defines the tasks that new licensees must be able to perform at the semester, as well as identifying the underlying knowledge of those tasks. The purpose is to provide a current description of practice, and that description of practice is used to develop the examination outline or the blueprint. And the blueprint tells us what's going to be tested and the percentage within each area of the exam that we're going to test on. It can also assist with decisions regarding practice issues. So if there's something under the question, the occupational analysis can include in the survey questions about trends or changes in the profession, and that research and that data can be used to assist stakeholders with decisions. It can also be used to understand the depth of the trends. So if there's things that are changing in the profession, or if something is up and coming, we can use the analysis information to find out more about those trends. The process begins with research. So we look at what other states are doing, what's done in the past, what's going on. We look at books. Part of the research leads into the news. We conduct interviews with subject matter experts. Sometimes we conduct focus groups with stakeholders to find out what's going on in the profession, what's changed, what's coming, again, what are those trends. We take all of that information and we put it through what we call task and knowledge statements, and those are the tasks that licensees perform on the job and then the knowledge they need. All of that information goes into a survey, and depending on how many licensees there are, we might send it to all licensees in California or a sample. That data comes back to us, presented to SMEs, find out, do they agree with the results? Are they in line with what's being done with California? That leads us to the creation of the examination outline. Again, the examination outline is for the, and all of that information gets written up in a report. So more on the examination outline. It's based on the description that's developed in the analysis. Again, it specifies what's critical. So we try to include everything that's important for or is covered in these profession. Only the critical task and knowledge will remain in the examination outline to be tested. And then that leads to identifying the relative weight or percentage of each major subject that will be assessed in an examination. And ultimately, it provides a direct link between the content and examination, and it's critical that what the standards require critical development, again, as mentioned, the legislative and professional testing standards higher than. Standard 1413 states that content domain of license examination should define clearly, specified in terms of the importance of the content for credential-worthy purposes. The occupational analysis establishes that link between the job and the examination, and it's how we form the basis for legally defensive examination. So why do national examinations use? One, it's a requirement of Code Section 139. Within the national reviews, we look at if an exam is valid for use in California. We verify is national developer following professional standards. Are they looking at practice in California, not only what's done nationally, but also what's done in California? Compare California practice to national practice. And then ultimately we determine, is there anything that's left out of the national examination that would need to be covered in California specific examination? The process is similar to an OA. We evaluate national occupational analysis. We look at how that was conducted and performed. We also look at their examination development process. We look at how they establish their passing score. Are they following established procedures? We look at their score, how they're scoring and their state. Is the exam too easy? Is it too difficult? We also look at how they administer their examination. Is it computer-based testing or paper pencil? Do they have appropriate security procedures in place? We also look at candidate information. Are they providing sufficient to the candidate? And then we conduct a linkage study. The linkage study I'm going to cover in the next slide, but basically it's to connect or look overlap between the California occupational analysis and the national. And then again, all of it to report. So linkage study, we're identifying areas of California practice are evaluated and are not evaluated by the national exam. So we're looking for overlap, holes, areas that are covered, are not covered. We compare, is practice in California the same as practice across the country? We look at the two examination outlines. And this is done with subject matter experts. So subject matter experts come in, California licensees, and they look at, is the national exam covering everything that's done in California, or are there pieces that are missing? And if there are pieces that are missing, that's when we talk about, is a California specific exam needed? And again, this slide kind of shows, where is there overlap or are there areas missing? Perhaps the scope of this could be slightly different. California or maybe California laws are different for one reason. And then we talk, are they enough that they need to be tested in a separate? Or it could be fine, sufficient, and it thoroughly covers the depth and breadth of the profession, and it's business as usual. And that concludes the presentation. So I'd be happy to answer questions about the proposal or about the process.
This is comment two. How long does it usually take for one of these studies that you're proposing? Let's say the SLD.
Typically, it takes 6 months to a year, just depending on the ability to get subject matter experts to come, how
So, what is the your opinion on doing one of the OAs in fiscal 17-18 as opposed to the recommendation of 18-19 and then 19-20? I know that we're very committed to trying to move things along quickly with this committee.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Did she hear it?
Are you asking whether or not we could do one of them
Yes.
in 17-18?
Yes.
Yes.
I am not sure. I would have to defer to my chief, but we definitely let Jessica know.
Okay.
I can find out. Jessica know.
Because based on their resources too and what they're doing. But
If
we can get
if we were, we would probably start closer to the end of the physical year. So they're in January or the spring,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe April. And it could possibly cross over between the two fiscal years. So
Right.
maybe taking it in 17-18 and in 18.
Okay.
And I just, I know we talked about the ABO, which is the SLG. That's not, I think, what we're really looking at first, if it's possible, if we are going to consider it, would be the NCLE. Because that's a bit of a concern. If we had a priority, we would be able to select that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we would defer to your preference of which one you felt needed to be started first.
So in the context, if there were resources to start the first study towards the end of the first fiscal year and it overlapped into the second fiscal year, in terms of our budgeting, do we pay for it all at once or would it be straddle?
Oh, so that's
We bill quarterly, so it would be a quarterly basis. But that can be worked out, that would be worked out between your office and our office.
Jessica is willing to cover it, so it's all good.
So at this point, we really can't move forward because you're still going to see when, if you could start. Is that correct? You would still have to get back to Jessica and then we would find out. Is that correct? I don't know if she heard me.
Were you asked, is that
Well,
question addressed to me?
Yes. I wanted to find out if, we're talking now whether we'd like to move forward on this, but we're still waiting. We'd have to still wait at this point whether or when you'd be able to start anyway. Is that correct? You don't know if
You're asking when the soonest
Yeah.
is that we can do it.
Yeah, what's the soonest we can do to start this analysis?
Again, I would have to go back and talk to my chief, but my guess would be, the soonest would be January or April,
And Jessica,
depending on our staff.
just from my
availability.
understanding, it would still need to go to the Board of Optometry, okay, before they can get started, right? So,
But I could bring it to the November meeting.
Okay.
right. So if we make the move that we would like to get this moving as soon as possible, it would have to be approved by the board in November. By that time, she can give you a more definite answer as to what the time frame is for the study.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
We want it, and then
I personally, I think I would love to get this moving. It seems like we have the resources. We want to know what the issues at hand are, and I defer to you two as to which study you guys feel is more appropriate to do first. But I think we should definitely get started on it.
And we have the resources,
Right.
we have the budget resources to get started. So it's better to spend a quarter's worth of money now if that was otherwise going to go unspent.
Mhm.
And that would relieve the pressure on the fourth quarter of the following year.
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts? which one do you think we should consider going? What analysis first, the NCLE or analysis on the annual?
Can I ask what the thought pattern is, just for my edification?
Exactly what was presented, the meaningfulness.
Mm-hmm.
National exam is meaningful to your work,
Right.
and we need to verify, are opticians fitting patients for contacts, because that's what that examination is really all about, that they're actually doing the fitting, and we know that the doctors are doing it more than but there are opticians in California who are doing it, so we don't want to move it away. We're just seeing what is the majority of the opticians practicing with that. That's why.
And I think more specifically to your question, and it, Ruby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that at the last meeting you had raised specific concerns about the NCLE more so because you were being tested for a lot more than what is actually happening in California.
Right.
So this OA is going to look at that to see if this exam is really properly testing for California. So I think that's why the emphasis on NCLE more so than the ABO to make sure that it is covering the correct spot. Right, Ruby?
That's correct.
And just so that study is $28,000, not including honorarium and travel expenses, or are these two tied together? I guess is the CLD. So there's 4 price points here, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So we're just looking at the NCLE for $28,000 roughly,
No, so you're
or are those
looking to do
two
it
combined?
together. And just so you know, the cost for subject matter experts as far as travel and all the expenses associated, because we just did one for the Board of Optometry.
Okay.
We're going through it right now. It's another $30,000. So I think the BCP that we had submitted for optometry was around $90,000 total. So just to let you know, it's a pretty good chunk of change that's not included in here.
Right, but if we're also doing it, if we're straddling 2 fiscal years, that I think that actually helps the budgeting of this in a much better way, is if we're straddling the 2 fiscal years. So, do
you want to
make a motion?
Yeah, I know that's what we've been building to,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if you would.
I would. I mean,
Anyway.
I would love to make a motion that we move towards doing the OA on the CLD and the NCLE in fiscal year 17-18, based on the recommendation of OPS. Them getting back to Jessica as well on the timing of it all.
So the recommendation is, the motion is to make the recommendation to the board to proceed with the occupational analysis and linkage study for as soon as possible with the data information from OPS.
And specifically NCLE?
And
NCLE.
specifically NCLE,
Okay.
yes.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, do we have any public comment?
I have to be honest, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
By the NCLE, that's for fitting, correct? And so you're,
Well, what happens in most working environments, you may need the NCLE just to even dispense and just to pull out boxes and verify and say, here, for your patients, here is your box of contacts.
okay.
And in some places, they don't.
Some places in California or in some places in the
California,
US? Okay.
in California. So if anyone is going to just take that exam is based on fitting contacts. And a lot of opticians are not fitting. Some of them are.
So if it's not required by California law, how do you have the authority to check to make sure the exam even?
The NCLE is required,
Is required. Okay, that's
for
what
a
I couldn't
CLD.
remember.
So for a CLD, the NCLE is required. For a spectacle, the ABO is required
So then it would be required for anybody pulling a box of contacts.
to get the.
That's where I got confused. So you're saying that if why have it required if all they're doing is pulling a box versus fitting? That's where I got confused.
All right, so we'll Bill?
Aye.
Todd?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So now we can move on to, and go back to agenda item number 3. To approve the minutes that we had for our last meeting. Right?
Yes.
Since we went through, okay, so, do we have any comments from, the members about the, agenda or the committee meeting for the last meeting we had?
So members, I want to make one clarification to the minutes. In the section, I'm scrolling down to it where it talks about the standards. So if you read here, it says Mr. Matu moved to keep disciplinary standards 1 through 16, taking nine out completely, moving down to optional. It's actually taking number 9 out, and 9 was the CLRE, and moving number 10, which was community service, down to optional. So I recommend to do an amendment to the minutes. But other than that, if there are no other comments, in the motion would be to approve the minutes as amended.
I just have a
Sure.
technical, Mr. Casella, are you a JD? Because I think it has a JD after
Oh,
your name.
yeah, that
Or is it
can,
junior?
that can be
Oh, you
stricken.
are.
I don't use it.
I didn't know if
Um,
it was meant to be junior and they put a D instead.
Oh, maybe,
I'm fine with
No, it was to his law degree.
Okay, that's fine.
yeah, that's not necessary. So that can be removed.
No, it's fine. I wasn't sure.
No, but
if it was meant to be.
that's just more of an instruction to staff on all the documents. You don't have to put that. I prefer it not put after.
Oh.
Okay.
I want it in.
You want to put it in?
I just didn't know if it was meant to be JR.
Right, because sometimes, right.
But I have no problem.
But I generally only use JR when I use the middle initial.
Oh, you also are a JR?
Yeah.
So you're a JR and a JD?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of J's.
Mm-hmm.
So Jessica, you made, should we make a motion about making that change? Would anyone like to make that?
I move to approve the minutes as amended, as Jessica had spoken earlier.
Okay. Do we have a second on that? Okay. Do we have any public comment on that? Okay, I'm going to call, yes? Yes.
Oh, so there's another change?
There's another change you want to make?
I'll amend the motion to also, and I don't even know if it's a real minute thing, but Anna indicated that the credential should only be SLD.
For
myself.
Yeah.
okay.
Just change your time.
You didn't want both of them.
I don't have it CLD, so it's not.
I know we'll take it.
And then you'd be subject to
I would love
discipline
it.
and mandatory conditions for representing yourself as something you're not.
We'll take it out. Thank you.
That's true. Okay, so we got a second and we took a vote on it already? Yes?
Now we need to
Okay.
get a vote.
Now, okay, Con?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Anna?
I
And I vote aye. Okay. So now we can move on to agenda item number 5, the outreach.
So members, attached to new materials is the proposed outreach plan from DC's communications team. This is what they put together for us after providing and getting input from the committee at the last meeting. So a couple of things that I've noticed is it doesn't have a real set timeline.
Right.
It just says up at the bottom that once you approve the objectives, and they would then propose a timeline. So if you have any direction that you'd like to give to them as far as what to start first or things we concentrate, for example, outreach to the ABO, we might want to give them the timeline of the exam schedule to do that. In addition to what DCA Communications team drafted, you have on your desk is a letter that Todd, our policy analyst, drafted. And this is the proposal to put in once they get their certificate, that if they pass the NTLE or the ABO, then this would go with that as well. So that's if you have any amendments amendments or recommendations to that letter and then to the communications plan, let us know.
I just have a question. So let's say I, for the first time, take the ABO, the board gets notified that I passed, and so it would be up to California to mail out this letter to me, to let me know.
No, so the idea would be as soon as you get that certificate from the ABO, this letter would be with it.
So the ABO
Would
agree.
distribute it for us,
Okay.
yeah.
And they're okay doing that?
We're
Or we
hoping,
haven't,
they
we
seem
haven't.
pretty open to helping in any way they can. I don't think they've seen the letter yet, Todd. They've seen the letter that we're asking.
The committee?
No, the ABO.
No.
Oh, the ABO. No.
Jim.
Right.
Okay. So we haven't had a firm yes yet, but they seem pretty open to helping
Okay.
in any way.
So, yeah, this would certainly take priority
Yeah.
to kind of ease up the confusion about what they need to do.
Yeah.
But we wanted to schedule it with the exam schedule, right?
Right.
And if we do adopt this, this can be done right away.
Right.
When's the ABO?
The next, there's 4 tests a year, so the next one will be in November, that timeline. And then after that, February, and then after that, May and August.
So then we'll want to try to get this to them.
Yeah.
Well, February, wouldn't the board have to, the Board of Optometry have to approve this as well? And
I don't think and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as when it comes out to educational materials or outreach, that's not something that necessarily has to go to the board every single time, right? Or do they have to? Because in the past, we were able to post things to our website and it wouldn't have to go to the board, and we would bring things that were, say, more controversial to get the board to approve it prior to posting to the website.
Right.
But
Right, so in November, you could just report, we've already
Sorry,
begun
outreach.
implementing the communications plan, and if they choose to exercise their jurisdiction and slow it down, they could at that time.
that's my understanding. I wouldn't think that the board has to approve
Every single
the,
one.
yeah, because
Right.
it's, as far as my job is to implement, and outreach as part of that.
Similarly, I don't think that, or from my perspective, the board has to approve the language of this letter, so whatever you hammer out with ABO,
Yeah. And everything gets approved through legal, so Mina approves
right.
everything and
So-
anything posted on our website. Right.
And the board seemed very happy to have this not on their plate.
Right. They've got a lot to worry about, yes. So what we're doing right now is looking at this draft, and we then want to go, if we want it. And
Yeah, and if you have any amendments, then you can do the motion similar to the minutes to approve as amended, or if there's significant changes, another option is to give us additional feedback, we make the changes and bring it back to the November 2nd meeting. So
Yeah.
it's up to you.
And that would work out great if we put it in a timeline, put all these topics in there. Okay.
Do we have I was trying to find it on the website last night. We don't have a landing page, do we? Still?
Not for specific to the RDOs. So
Right.
if you go to our website, it depends on where you look. So if you go to the applicants, so I have it right here. If you go to the applicants, and then it does the optometrist, and then a section for RDOs. So it does break it out, and it's just the headings are all the same. The same for the licensees. You have the optometrist section, and then below that you have the RDO section.
Right.
And also for the laws, I believe it's the same. So it's separating them out.
But that's part of what they're looking at, no?
Redoing the website.
Yeah.
I have just clarification on the target audience. There's just generally optician profession, students. Are we going to be more specific, like opticianry schools? There's a few of them. We have all the American Career College, and then more part that's opening up. Are we going to be very specific as to which schools? Or are they going to be throughout the U.S. or just here in California?
So I think this is broad enough to do what the committee wants to do. So if the committee wants to do California or nationwide, this is broad enough to encompass that.
Does the ABO set? I mean, you may not know this, obviously. Do they send out other letters like this for other states?
I don't believe they do. We can double check, but I think that this is the first request to do it.
I do know they send out their own congratulating with
Right.
a certificate and other materials, and now you completed the basic, and now consider the advanced or becoming a master.
Right.
Now for this as well, I know in the past, on the application portion, it required them to link it with the term.
And would you mind speaking up?
Yeah, just-
Sorry, they can't hear you.
So I know in the past, whenever they registered, it had to be linked to their workplace. That is the yes, the RDO. And so does that mean it was removed out of the application at this point? Because
Yes, so the next agenda, one of the next agenda items are the new applications, and you'll see that information has been removed.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say otherwise that'll make it hard for them to register.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think the letter looks fine to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we can get it to them for their November, how long? So the exam's in November, and then I'm assuming it takes like a month to get results or something.
You would get a letter, I would say, within a month's time, and a certificate for
For
ABO.
ABO.
No, the ABO, as soon as you pass, it instantly tells you. you
Oh,
passed.
online?
If you didn't pass,
Right.
then you wait a month for your rejection letter.
But this goes with the certificate.
Certificate,
Right.
right. And the certificate comes a month later.
Comes in a month later.
Right.
So then we have like till December in theory to get it all ironed out.
And with the concept of this letter, is there any marketing where you can also revisit this or put it in the website? Because you're going to do something on the website on marketing. I think there'd be a benefit.
You mean to post this letter on our website?
Not necessarily the letter, but the language and what it's specifying. This is what you've got to do now.
Yeah, I think that would be included in updating, revising our website to add additional information.
Yeah, it's hard to find information on our website.
It is.
It's very not easy.
I know.
I spent a good 15 minutes trying to find our agenda.
Me too. Yes.
It's under board meetings.
Yes, I figured that out after about 15 minutes.
I get it through about. What do you guys
That's how I get it.
About
That's
us.
how I get it. I've always
About
gotten
us,
it
yeah,
through
yeah.
about, yeah.
Oh, we're all visual, if it's not on.
But I think there's definitely a lot of room on our website for
Improvement.
improvement.
Agreed.
Can we ask for public comment on any of these? On the letter or any of the marketing?
Well, I actually just had, I was trying to pull it up because it was harder earlier, to the earlier point. Does it say that you have to be registered in California to practice? Because can't you practice under a registered RDO? So if it says you have to be registered, I was trying to find where I saw it, where I was seeing.
I'm going to answer that, Annie. If I don't have a license and my manager has a license, I can work under my manager.
So you could be ABO certified without needing to be registered.
You could, but it's worth being registered.
That's not the question.
I just
Yeah.
think that it's a statement
Oh,
question.
it
It's
is.
a it's more a question about a legal statement.
Yeah,
Mr.
Correct,
Casella's
it's
point
under the registered.
is if you're stating, and I'm sorry I can't find it right here, but if you're stating that you have to be registered when you don't to work, then you are
Yeah.
It's a nuanced state, like in the letter, it's nuanced as saying the certification is not registration to practice in California,
Correct.
which is a true statement.
No, that's true.
But there's also a way to work in California
Without
separate from being registered in California. And that's if you're working under.
I just want to be thoughtful about that, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry I can't pull it up right here, but I'd hate for people to think they can't work if they're not registered
Right.
and they can. So
So maybe we
I
could
see
go-
the point in trying to make sure everybody gets registered. So.
I'll take a closer look at it.
Okay, great.
First time I'm seeing it and make any suggested
Okay, great.
legal edits.
But that's a
Thank
good.
you.
No, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Fine.
Thank you.
Well, it does say, but before you can practice in California, you can actually practice without.
Yeah, so we have to clarify that.
Well, are they?
And it says you're required to register,
Yeah.
which you are not required to register.
Right.
Thank you, sorry.
So we have to clarify that.
But
Your
are
question.
they?
No, it's on the. you will look on the internet. It's on the.
Okay,
on
perfect.
Are they working as opposed to practicing
Right.
under a license?
Right.
Now
Now we're talking about very
Well,
technical
and-
wordage, right?
Should look at it.
right, but it makes a difference because you could do all of this stuff without going to school because your mom and dad own the optometry business and teach you how to put black dots on the lenses. And no ADO, no anything, no license, no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we had some clarity on that. I think would
Yeah.
probably be helpful, so.
And it's true for a lot of non-licensed states as well. So a lot of states are really not required.
right.
Not missing the point again of trying to get folks who need to be
register.
registered,
Right.
registered, but I think what we're concerned about is any misleading statements that
Right.
you can't practice, because we'll get the questions, yes. With the, oh no, behind it, so, thank you.
So that letter will be reviewed and revised.
Correct. We can bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay. To our next meeting
Right.
with you.
So that's
And in discussing with ABO, they probably make the same point.
Yeah.
And
So and others that will be incorporated and it'll be fixed up by staff.
And so then after it's reviewed and revised, we still don't need to take it to the board for them to approve.
Right.
I don't think so.
Okay.
And another recommendation, if you don't want to wait until November to see it, one thing that you could do is delegate authority for me to work with Mina and get the legal language in there, because if you're okay with the policy content in the language, then perhaps Mina and I can work out the legalese of it and move forward with it prior to going to November.
Okay.
Yeah, my thought is with with a lot of this communication stuff and the actual details of the letter are something that can be delegated to staff, just like the board has delegated to the committee. That we don't need to approve every letter that goes out
Right.
or whatever. Or what color the website's going to be, or all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So do we need to do anything to give you that, let's just say we're gonna go ahead and do that, do we?
We're going to approve I'll make a motion to approve the communication strategy as noted, and including authorizing staff to provide the content for the letter and the website and all the communications activities.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any public comment? Or any comments from the committee? Okay, so I will take a roll. Vote. Anna?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Todd?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Great. Now we can move on to agenda item number 6, and that's what we were talking about, getting the application. So Jesse.
So members, in front of you is the work product. After our last meeting, the committee had discussed removing the decoupling issue and all of the linkage in the applications, and also directed staff to work with legal to draft proposed regulations to incorporate the applications by reference. So that is what you have in front of you. You have you have 3 applications. What we are recommending is to actually combine the SLD and CLD to provide the option for them to just apply on one application for both registrations, or they would do one or the other, but it's the same application. There's other amendments that we had also made to it. We had included, that's the regs, but when you go to the applications, sorry, I'm scrolling. So other things that we had added, this one is this for spectacle and contact lens. So this is an individual registration type. Things that you did not see on the prior application include the military information. There were some pieces of legislation that were passed in the last few years to expedite applications for military or spouses of military. So we had to ask those questions, and this was not on the prior application. We did remove the other information about tying it to the RDO location, so that's no longer on here. And we just kind of revamped how it looked. We added the disciplinary and criminal history information. Oh, we also removed the photo ID requirement. We didn't, it's not a requirement in statute or in reg, and we didn't see the need for the photo ID. There are some who, that requirement we had for optometrists right now, but when we revise it, we're recommending to also remove it. Mostly it was for those programs who would administer their own practical exam. We used to do that a long time ago and just never removed the requirement from the application once we stopped doing it. But it's to verify they are who they say they are. When they come in to the exam, they can match the photo of the application to the photo of their ID. But since we're not actually administering the examination, that verification is done through the ABO. We don't think there's a need to require them to attach the photo ID.
Sorry, go ahead.
My question is the criminal record history language carryover, is it consistent with what other licenses require under DCA? That's specific technical information that I just want to know that we just didn't make it up for this application.
Yes, it is. And the applicants are required to give their fingerprints, the individual applicants, and that will be used for determining convictions. And also, you're allowed to ask those questions to determine.
And that's
denial.
how the state asks them.
And that's
This isn't
consistent with other
anything new.
applications.
So there's no need, for example, on 18. On 18, like we're not going to go so fine as to say, oh, I suggest that in the bold part after the first sentence we put exceptions, colon, a new paragraph that says exceptions, colon, convictions that were adjudicated in juvenile court or traffic. There's no need for us to improve this because this is standard language. Because I think it's horrible state standard language. But if it's state standard language, we'll go with it. I understand that, and that's why I'm asking, is this the way it's done? Or is this our way of doing it? In which case, then I might propose changes.
I think Jessica got it from the applications for optometrists. I don't think we did an exhaustive review of all the other different applications.
Right. So my concern on this, there's a it's a contemporary issue of what it means to have been convicted of a crime and then try and get a job afterwards. And I want to ask the question as necessary given the context of the license, but this can be kind of confusing. It's not for me. I'm a lawyer and I read these things carefully, all the time. And so it's like I'm all for using state prescribed language, but if this is just a cut and paste job because this is what's on the optometry application, I want to know that the optometry application reflects the current way the state asks the question.
I'm pretty sure it's standard, but we can go back and find out.
Yeah, so for example, my motion would be that, to approve these applications and the company, to recommend that the board approve these applications and the recommended regulatory language to change them, provided that we're using the standard language that the state uses on criminal record history questions.
And if there is no standard language, what would your motion?
If there is no standard language, I would suggest in item 18, where the question is, have you ever been convicted or pled guilty or nolo contendere to any offense in the United States or its territories? The question makes sense. But the bold part beneath it says, this includes every citation, infraction, misdemeanor, and or felony, including traffic violations, period. And then I would make a new paragraph and then add the word exceptions, before the word convictions.
So you would keep the content, just
I would
make
keep
it-
the content,
make
but
it-
the sentence before says every traffic violation, and the next sentence says not traffic violations under $300.
So you just want to add exceptions, :
Yes.
Let's just do that.
No, but if
Yeah.
I don't want to
Right.
undo DCA's state form,
I don't think there is a state burden.
okay.
So,
Then I think that would just be cleaner and more grammatically correct as a paragraph.
And I have a question. Not to make it,
Oh, one other point. The traffic infraction, the dollar amount. I'd like to take whatever year that language was first adopted as $300 and index it for inflation to reflect $2017. Because nowadays, once you get a ticket,
It's $475.
what do you count? The court costs, the clerk fee, if you go appear to challenge it,
You
or
could put the word base fine, I'm sorry, I think we're speaking out of turn,
Uh-huh.
but you could put the word base fine in there, because base fines actually haven't gone up in decades. To your point, you could find language that, because you're right, the penalties go up all the time, the add-ons.
right, that's how we
Yeah.
fund the courts.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
But there could be a reflection of that, because you're right, it looks like $300 total.
Yeah.
And
So we'll and request counsel look into the issue if we can say traffic infractions with the base fine of $300 or less, to reflect that concept that we're not capturing all of the other increments that are attached to a traffic violation.
do you
now.
mean to catch like red light violation and stuff like, you don't mean to, right? Okay, that's to your point.
Right,
Yeah.
but a red light violation in LA might be $257, and then on top of it, you end up having to pay an extra $300 in costs. And now is that an $800?
Correct.
Now am I going to burden the state by reporting that
Great.
and take more time to process the applications and so forth?
There are also no red lights, but I have.
Right.
are there any additional comments on?
I have a question. Well, not his topic, but you had
Well,
another
I
question.
had, only because the application says minimum requirements, and what I wanted to bring up is, would you want the applicants to say that they attended some sort of formal education? It's not required.
I would recommend not. I would only recommend what the requirements are in law for the board.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend it on application.
Do optometrists on their application put
what university they attended?
For education requirements, because education is required, they put that information in. But since it's not required for these dispensers, I would recommend not putting it in.
It would be inconsistent with
That's
the
true.
statute and might not go through as a regulation.
That's very true. That's why I need clarification.
The fee schedule is a little, just as a normal human being, is a little confusing to me. Application versus registration. Also, you could probably combine those 4 lines into 2 lines because it's the same pricing.
So we can't actually
Oh, you
because
can't?
there's separate charges in the statute scheme,
Okay.
and so we have to have them separated
Separate, I
out.
understand. So do they pay $350 when they, or do they pay? I'm just, they pay $350 when they apply.
And so they would pay $150,
50, and
and
then
upon approval, then they pay the additional $200
okay.
for the registration.
And just for clarification, in the past, the first year they registered, you provide them a license for 1 year, and then after that, you increase it to 3 years. Is that still?
So for clarification, it was up to a year, but it was really they expire the last day of the birth month, so it could be less than a year. However, with our sunset bill 1708, they actually changed the expiration to a 2-year term. So effective January 1, it will go to a 2-year term. So they'll be from the date of issuance. So it's 2 years, and then they'll have to renew every 2 years.
Any further comments on the application? Yeah. Do you want to go then to the next application, or do we? We made. You did say something about the criminal part of it, right? And we didn't take a vote on it. Or
Well, that will just,
That will
that's,
fall
that,
together.
we will do it all,
Together, okay.
the whole package,
All right.
together. And
So should we
add
move
it
on to the non-resident for contact lens seller? And that has to do with that's not the NCLE, that's,
You're looking at companies such as 1-800 Contacts,
That's right.
dispensing contacts into California.
okay.
Like 1-800 contacts.
Yeah,
or
we
whatever.
have maybe 6 of them in California.
Just want to add clarification to that. Do you have any comments on it?
No.
Do we have any public comment? Okay, so we can move on to the next application, and that is for the RDO. And what, anything there? We know that we already removed something, or we haven't highlighted any of them. I'm kind of confused why. Any fingerprint requirements for corporations?
Why that line is highlighted?
So that highlight was actually for you, just, it won't be in
Oh,
the
thank you for first. I
Yeah,
was thinking
it
that
was-
she wanted it.
So I added that
Sorry.
because Business and Professions Code, I think it's 144, requires that all applicants provide fingerprints, a full set of fingerprints, but you can interpret that to mean individual applicants. It's really hard in some corporations where there's multiple shareholders to get everyone's fingerprints. So to take it out of regulations, if you decide, let's say there's a corporation that's 100% stocks owned by one person, that might be a case where you want their fingerprints. So we decided to make it on a case-by-case basis. And then within the application, I think there's a section where they're supposed to provide, if it's a corporation, ownership interest. Do we have that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that would be on a case-by-case basis for corporations. But that highlight would be removed. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think I had a question about this one. Did we remove SLD from the RDO too, because I believe that public member from the last meeting had concerns about that due to how is that protecting the public by removing someone who's licensed, because how do we know we're working under someone's license?
So we're not removing the requirement that if they're fitting and adjusting, they have to have a CLD or an SLD present. What we're doing is removing the requirement to provide that information in order to get a registration.
Okay.
And so having it on the application, that's where it was then requiring it, and so we wouldn't be able to process the application until we got that information. So we're not saying everybody can dispense without a CLD or SLD. What we're saying, in order to obtain the registration, it's not required by law for them to have that. Is that right?
Right.
I just wanted
Because
to
that becomes a problem when they're trying to start up their business and they don't have the CLDs or SLDs hired yet. So it's not decoupling in terms of the practice and the business, but just for purposes of the application and
just to
registration.
start out. Okay.
So,
I don't know if it's my eyes or I just don't know how to spell, but for individual, is it individual sole proprietor? It's under state registrations.
The black box.
Yeah, black box. Is that is that?
It is
Okay.
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 Page 12.
Yeah, there's a. Yeah, I was like, I actually went. I was like, how am I?
Yeah. So we'll go
Yeah.
make any final
It just
technical changes.
just threw me off. Sorry.
Thank you.
I was seriously like, do I know how to spell?
No, I don't.
so on the corporate entity section, and maybe I don't know how the world works in this industry, but are there other types of business entities like partnerships that are not corporations where this might?
So for partnerships, that's under individual, sole proprietor, or partnerships. That's the above section, and this is for the corporation.
Okay, and that would include all. Got it.
And the partnerships would require
The partners.
the partners to be listed.
And they still get fingerprinted, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
It's just corporations who are not,
Correct.
even though they're.
On a case by case basis.
Right.
I just heard that. Public comment.
That's also consistent
Do we have a
with-
public comment?
I actually do have a couple questions. On the highlighted part where it says on a case-by-case basis, if you decide to go that direction, if there could be guidance that's not interpreted as underground regulations, of course, only because what we'd hate to do is have to wait for the application to be processed to find out what fingerprints we need, and then have another 6 weeks, because then we gotta chase down those corporate partners. But what we like to do is know when we're applying, chase down those corporate partners, get their fingerprints processed and or identified with this, and then submit the application so that when you're going through that application, it's as efficient as possible when we're opening. So that's my only hiccup on that suggestion. I understand and appreciate the suggestion, because we hate to have 25 corporate partners or all fingerprinted, but I think we've done this enough that if we can get a sense of what you're going to need, we can include that in the packet, and then you're there. So just something to consider is there, if there's a guidance document or something.
I think maybe, I think we could give some guidance on whether it would be the officers or just the president or the managing director.
I don't think that's been decided yet.
Because I think we're fairly used to, we first of all appreciate not doing the notary anymore. That has been very helpful. But I think we're used to getting fingerprints from certain folks. So if we know that's what we're going to do, then we'll just jump that, get that information included. But if we have to wait till, we're in the queue to be processed, then there's a whole other.
Who do you usually do get the
I
fingerprints from?
believe, and you guys probably know better than I, but I believe it's the North America president, and then a few officers. So there's a responsible party that we're we're completely comfortable fingerprinting. I just think we need to, I want to make sure.
You would rather have it up front than down the line, which makes sense too.
Yeah, just in case or if there's a change or whatnot, we know, because we'd hate to have 3 stores held up because we didn't send the right fingerprints.
And that would also save on staff processing time as well.
Correct, yes,
So just get it all done ahead.
If there could be, I think, and if there could be a guidance document, I think you're authorized to do guidance documents in this format, so I think we'd be good.
I
as
mean,
long
if
as
it's applied to everyone in the same
Correct.
class, it would be a regulation. so
Yeah,
you'd have
I would
to-
recommend not to do.
Okay, well, how then for us it would be more critical to not, or to have the information up front, so however you want to manage that, I think is important.
Okay, we'll consider it.
Yeah, thank you. And then I wanted to also say thank you related to the issue before on the decoupling and the interpretation. Truly appreciate it. I think it will make our store registrations and the SLD registrations be that much more efficient and smooth. So thank you very much for that consideration.
So do we have any other comments? Do you want to go ahead and make a motion? Or do you have anything
Yeah,
else?
so I'll make the motion to approve, to recommend that the board approve the regulations and forms with the changes we've discussed. And further, to the extent additional changes are made that we've contemplated, like this fingerprint issue, that if you come up with a solution for that, send that to the board too, and they can decide the final issue on that, as opposed to coming back to us to say, oh yes, we agree with you, it should be the secretary and the officers, and then we don't need to hold it up further.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any discussion in public? Okay, then I will take a vote. Anna?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Todd? And I vote aye. Okay, great, we'll move along. Let's go now move to agenda item number 7. That is the update on the disciplinary guidelines.
So members, number 7 is the disciplinary guideline with the changes that the DOC had provided at the last meeting, and also the recommended regulations in order to incorporate the disciplinary guidelines. One thing I would recommend is, instead of doing the complete merge that we have done, maybe take out, have a section to where it's the optometry section, and then a section where it's the RDO program section, because we're applying the uniform standards differently. And because just the nuances of changing the verbiage of a CLD versus an optometrist, when we keep it the slash and let the ALJ decide which one to do, we just run more of a risk of having the wrong verbiage in there. So if we just separate them out, keep it all one document, but you'll have your own section dedicated to the RDOs. So all the verbiage is the same, it's just I'm recommending having separate sections. And so we're asking for any additional changes that you would have, or a motion to approve the discipline, or to recommend approval for the board, and also the regulations that we provided.
So, do we have, you don't have a version yet of the separate non-optometrist?
No, but if you'd like to see it before we move on, what I could do is we can, because we do have a meeting on November 2nd, so we can have you see what it looks like, and then you can make the recommendation at that time, because we'll have it ready.
I'd be more comfortable with that. Again, as
Okay.
I read through these and thought we'd come up with good solutions last time, you know, I'm still struck trying to figure out the the bargain of, like, I still don't know how much these people make, and it makes a difference that if you come to American Career College and you get your license and you're making, I don't know if you make $36,000 a year or $96,000 a year, and you get a DUI after your sister's wedding on a weekend out of town, totally unrelated to practice, and suddenly you're subjected to even a lower standard of random drug tests that are going to cost you thousands of dollars over the course of the year, or to assert your rights and say, I want to be evaluated and have to pay for that $10,000 evaluation. My concern is that people are going to, you just give up your license because you can't afford to give up a quarter of your income just to assert your right. And what that means to the consumer is that you get experienced people dropping out of the profession, which means it's going to be all, not all, but there'll just be more new, inexperienced people who've gone to school and learned but don't have that experience yet. And I'd like to reread it again, and separating it out might make me more comfortable.
Yeah,
with
so we
it.
can take it back and we'll separate them out.
Can I make some comments? Because I've thought about this a little bit more after our last meeting, and just to recap and make sure you all understand, the substance abusing terms have to be applied once there is a determination that the licensee is a substance abusing licensee. But how you get to that determination was what we talked about with the three options. And so the first option was in any case just involving, in any conduct involving drugs or alcohol, there would be a presumption that the licensee is substance abusing. And
that's what applies to optometry.
And that's what optometry. And I think part of your discussion was that seems really overbroad, and it would be a lot more for your enforcement budget to make that presumption in any case. And then the other one that you considered and you rejected was if after a formal hearing that the evidence showed that there was a substance abusing licensee, then the uniform standards would be applied. The cons, I think, of that, which I don't know if I pointed out, would be that it would place the burden on the executive officer to determine which cases to plead as substance abusing, and then the extra cost with proving from the executive officer in the AG's office that the licensee was substance abusing. The pros of that is within the context of the administrative hearing, the licensee can defend him or herself. So the one you chose was that there would be a test first in it, and the way it's written right now in the regs is any case involving drug or alcohol. You could consider changing that based on your comments to any cases maybe with a higher standard where there's an abuse of alcohol, like maybe multiple DUIs or the background of that, that individual, or there's a higher content for the blood, the blood alcohol. So instead of just involving, it could be a case of where there's an abuse of it. You could then have the clinical diagnostic evaluation. In addition to the costs that the licensee would have to pay for that, and again, they might find out after paying all that cost that they're not a substance abusing licensee, but they paid those costs. It's unclear, even though this is the way dental hygienists use this, it's in their statute, it's in their regs. I'd be happy to go back and talk to their executive officer and see how they actually implement it. The uniform standards require when there's a clinical, normally when there's a substance abusing licensee determination and there's a clinical diagnostic evaluation, that licensee has to stop practicing for the 30 days it takes. So that would also be a loss of income to the licensee. So I just didn't know if you considered that at the last meeting either.
And in our context, the licensee could then immediately surrender their license and go work as an assistant in an optometrist's office, applying their skills.
Or under a CLD, SLD registration.
Right.
They'd be suspended from that particular registration for 30 days until there was
Right.
a
So,
determination.
in that sense, what it would do is take this person off of our radar, and they'd be performing the exact same services on the consumer. So the safety risk would essentially not be mitigated at all, and arguably be worsened because now they wouldn't even be a registrant of ours, so they wouldn't even be on our radar.
So none of these is perfect. There's pros and cons to each one. The pro of the one that you chose was that there would be an expert evaluation to say this person is a substance abusing licensee. In addition, you could add the abuse language instead of involving drugs or alcohol. You could say in case where there's an abuse of drugs or alcohol. But I haven't talked to Jessica about these thoughts. So
Okay.
she has anything to add.
Are there any other situations? The dental hygienist one is
That seems like a pretty good.
is the one
Yeah.
you cited that might be analogous.
That's the one that has the same option. I just don't know if they go further
Right.
And require the licensee to stop practicing for 30
Right.
days, if they require that, yeah. So,
But like obviously physician's assistants are much more hard.
I think the majority would have the presumption.
Oh, right, and the farm techs have the direct access to the stuff, so that's a little different.
So I guess for clarification, so immediately when you find something, a situation like this, and they move their license and they can go the next day or next 2 weeks and just get another job. They just work under someone else. There's no limitation. Nothing.
Theoretically.
Okay. Well, yeah. So this 30 days you're referring to.
It's that license.
Well, I'm still kind of troubled by the thing, and I think separating them out, because when I read through it, I was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, it seems just as harsh as it was before. So,
Yeah, we'll separate it out and bring it back to the November meeting.
And then maybe have a little more clarification from what the dental hygienists also
Implementation.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how they do.
I think that would be a useful tool for us to at least jump off of.
And if you're going to go to abusing versus involving,
What is abusing at that point, and what is, I mean, involving is at least, that's a simple thing, but what is abusing?
so for example, in the lens crafter stores, is your arc towards having all of the workers licensed and registered, or
We have some registrations and some we don't have registrations because they're new to the store
Right.
or new to the profession, so we bring them along. So it's a mix in all of our stores.
right? But ultimately, you like
We always have a registration. Let me be clear. about
right? No, I understand that. I'm
Always one or two or three.
right, and then other people
Yeah.
and on a different arc, potentially leading to that.
Yeah.
You're obviously going to have some people who might just do it for a year and
I would
choose
not be,
some other path.
I don't know if Lens Crafters or Walmart or corporate environment is a great discussion for the substance abuse because I'm probably not far off base. I don't know offhand that we probably have our own policy on
Yeah.
substance abuse.
I if you have to have this thing
Oh,
to
yes.
get the job, and now all of a sudden you have to give it up. The truth is you don't, because they're different. In the corporate environment, there are different policies.
Yes, but you could also go to a private environment. In a corporate environment, I might ask for previous work experience, which leads to trickling questions. and all that.
Right.
Yeah, so I would. I'm sorry about the public. I don't know if I wait for public comment. I appreciate the thought process here, and so I would ask that if it's possible to get those, and I'm not kind of big ask with everything on the board's plate, but if it's possible to get that rewrite, maybe. I've had a text or two from a lawyer saying, "What? Wait, hold on, what?" While we're sitting here. So having the 10 days for this to be reviewed, I think would be helpful to fill your, sort of backfill some of the conversation related to experience in the field, if that's possible.
Yeah, the
I know I'm
materials
asking a
paperwork
lot.
meeting will be at least 10 days prior to the meeting.
Okay, great. I know that.
And we'll send out a listserv out to everybody letting them know.
Thank you. That way it just gives time for, because sometimes we have to check these policies against the store policies and the employment policies and all of that.
So you want to see language for each of the 3 different options and follow up on implementation of.
I think that you want all of the materials ahead of time because we had a glitch. So, and remember this, and I'm way off topic, but this was supposed to be posted a lot sooner. There was a glitch on the internet team, and they scrambled this morning to get it up as they thought it was. So yeah, the intent is always to provide you materials a lot sooner.
And I completely appreciate this is always a fluid process, which what's nice about this committee format. I just think this is one of those topics where if we had that full 10 days, it's important to have. Thank you.
So we're just going to.
We can move on.
Okay. Are there any other topics? Okay, no more public comment. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item number 9, and that you will find on your handouts.
Yeah, so agenda item 9, members, it's to help with the conversations about initial registration and renewal requirements. So what Todd, our plus analyst, did is he did outreach to all of the states who regulate the dispensers and for renewal requirements. Attached to that is also a plot graph showing you if there was any correlation to education versus how they did on the exam. Because as you may recall from the previous meetings, that was one of the assumptions, is the reason why the pass rates are so low is because we don't require as much as others. But what you will see from the plot graph is that that's not necessarily the case. The blue dots on your plot graph are the ones who require some kind of education or experience. The yellow are those who require no education or experience. Red is us. So you'll see that there's not really a correlation. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but for the ABO, there's not really a correlation for education versus how well they do on the exam. We're doing additional research on that. Todd, do you want to give a little overview of as far as the specific number of people taking the exam? For California, that's a lot higher than all the other states.
Yeah, a few of the other variables we decided might be important for this, as opposed to because this is simply average pass rate by state. We'd spoken recently about also looking into the passing score and any deviation from that passing score, because the thought is it's one thing if a state, most people squeak by. And as well, it's important to note that even though these are all average pass rates, California has a huge number relative to any other state. For the ABO, I think it was 1,262 took the test in 2016, and the next closest state was New York, who had 300 people take it. So we're talking, 4 times as many. And then for the NCLE, it's not quite as big a disparity, but it is still 337 in California, and the next closest was Florida with 241. So 50% more people taking, which, we are working with percentages and averages, but at the same time, if you wanted to, it's a rough comparison to make to say New Hampshire, which had a 0% pass rate on the NCLE, but only had 3 people take the test, which is statistically insignificant in terms of making that average worth much here.
So members, we wanted to do this research because we know one of the things you're considering is adding either education up front in order to obtain that registration, and or adding adding any continuing education requirements for the renewal. So we wanted you to have a snapshot of what the world looks like right now, and then caution the DOC when you're discussing what requirements to add on. Keep in mind that we want to do it for how it's protecting the consumer, so we want to be able to address what consumer harm is happening and why that CE is needed. And also know, I think we went over with the Little Hoover Commission and one of the first meetings, and just the whole atmosphere of actually moving away from regulations, removing unnecessary barriers. So it's going to be a pretty big, I think, uphill battle if you want to add any additional requirements, and we'll have to be very clear on what consumer harm we're providing by adding these requirements on. So with that, we just ask for the direction from the committee. Where do you want to go from here? We can wait and to see what happens with the occupational analysis as far as education, but we really just need direction now from you of where you want to go from here.
So the occupational analysis is definitely going to help. Looking at continuing education from the standpoint of this industry is always changing, and there's new technology coming in. It's something that I would hope that a committee and public members would look at. People could function for years, and you can see it in that non-licensed say they could still. It's just there's a lot of things that go unnoticed. A lot that consumers are always have someone supervising them and teaching them and training them, which is helpful. But we'd like to at least get everyone to look at new technology, look at what else they're needing to fill in those educational gaps. And I think continuing education helps with those learning gaps, things that they need to be more aware of. So I mean, that's just sort of my start input.
I totally, looking at this, I would say, yeah, I think continuing education is more important than this. It addresses the changes in the modern stuff that you had mentioned. I'm wondering how much of a priority, first off, and you're also right that the analysis is going to inform this. But in terms of our priorities of, we did our whole list, it's like, this is not screaming that, like, this should be one of the things that we should get bogged down with right now in favor, even just the, like, administrative stuff of the forms for the applications and the communications plan and all of that, like, getting the house in order before this. This just are we hover around the 50% rate for both of them? So the bigger question is, are those, why are the people in Connecticut so much smarter? Do so well, and it might be because they have a requirement in Connecticut that teaches to the test.
Right.
So, for example, like in the California bar, we know certain subject matter that's going to be on. And back when I took it, I think marital property or something like that was always on the California. Well, not always on, but it was a requirement that California has that very few other states have in terms of being one of the items that you're going to be tested on. And so given that it was almost a unique item to California, it was almost assured that one of the 6 questions would be about that. And so some people made a point to take a course in that subject matter, so when the question's asked, they could give a satisfactory response. And
Well, I mean, Connecticut, if you look at what the requirements are, it's a pretty high level. Seems like associate degree or completion of 4 years and 8,000 hours of apprenticeship training. Like, you're talking about a pretty high bar right there.
right.
Compared
It's
to,
like 8,000, right?
this says 8,000
I think
hours.
some of our other professions don't require that, like radiology,
Right.
don't require 8,000 hours.
So, I mean, that seems like,
Yeah, but for the ABO, for example, the three yellow dots don't require anything. Are above California. And so, and it may be that there's a Princeton review or something for this test, and those people took it, but.
Well, so another thing for those, because we had similar discussions with those yellow dots and why they would be higher. What this isn't capturing is, even though it's not required to get the education up front, that doesn't mean they're not doing it.
Right.
Correct.
So those yellow dots are actually, some of them could be in states that aren't, or they aren't regulated, or it's not required, so they are trying harder because they actually are applying for it and don't necessarily need it.
Or they could be Californians who took the New Hampshire, who took it from New Hampshire after being educated.
Looking at the grid, Arizona is a yellow dot on the plot,
Yeah.
not requiring. Yet look at their CEs. Look at what they have. 12? Is it 12 CEs per every 3 years?
yeah.
You see, they're still doing the continuing education, even though they're not required. So,
Well, also Arizona, it says 2 letters verifying employment in the field in 3 of the previous 6 years. So,
And I should clarify though, the education column here is for education prior to examination, separate from the continuing education. Continuing education is not what's indicated by the education column.
but Arizona they're still working in the field for 3 of the last 6
It's
years.
like apprenticeship.
Yeah, exactly. And wait, what? So what are the other 2 then?
I mean,
New Hampshire.
the only requirement California has in statute is just pass the exam. That's it.
Pay fee and apply.
And that's it.
And people may just be like, I'll take the test and let's see how I do, and maybe if I do it, I'll get a job kind of thing.
But the other states may be regulating the people in the optometry practice who, and that's why in Arizona you can have 2 letters from people kind of vouching for your apprenticeship in the field, because they're regulating people who are invisible to us for this purpose.
So Ohio also, which has no education degree, a degree or 2-year apprenticeship, at least 1,000 hours, or 2 years experience employed by in the field. So like they're getting educated, it's just not necessarily a requirement per se.
Well, and like we had in our first meeting here, we had the woman speak about how the people working in the optometry shop knew everything, and she had been through the education program, and it was like, was impressed by the non-educated, non-regulated folks knowing how to do everything.
Right.
Not public comment yet, but
Yes, please.
there's a couple of thoughts I have on the CE. If we're just looking at this pass rates, I agree with the previous comments. You have to be really careful making policy decisions based on pass rates. They may have programs that target populations to help boost. We have a very real prison program here that allows people to come out of prison with a job. So we don't know what they're coming to the table with education-wise, so we don't know what their pass-fail rate could be. And that's something that the legislature has supported for years. So I agree that if you're really thoughtful, if you're just looking at pass-fail rates, and then continuing education is scrutinized because it becomes a barrier. To your point earlier, how much do these folks make? If you have to get 10 hours of continuing education and you're making, with our minimum wage going up, maybe closer to minimum wage, because retail, at the end of the day, it depends on where you're at in that scale, then if you're making $25 an hour, maybe it's a hurdle to get 10 hours of continuing education. But more importantly, what I think is also important is the consumer harm. There are 28 states that don't even regulate opticians. So what I'm noticing and what I'm looking for, putting my analyst hat on, is what's the consumer harm? Is there consumer harm in the 28 states that don't regulate? And does it compare to the consumer harm in the 22 states that do regulate and have CE? What is that margin? Because the legislature is scrutinizing more the kinds of hurdles licensure may put on folks who want to get into a profession, particularly healthcare that has a higher average minimum wage than any other profession in the state. So there is a conversation happening about those kinds of financial barriers or time barriers that go into. So I would really encourage that consumer protection point and where is the consumer harm. Because if you're going for you want folks to be better educated, I think there's an appreciation, but there's a lot of proof that they're seeking now at the legislative level, because I've done a few pieces and been stuck by that. So that's my only. And then obviously for my client, we are concerned about anything that creates a barrier to more people, wanting to do this job, because it's, we need people, we need a workforce to make sure, and we train our workforce. You're on a piece of equipment, you better know how to use it.
And a couple to add on, thank you, Kat. For the pass rates, one thing too that I don't think I clarified this meeting is that the ABO is not concerned with the pass rates, and I don't think the committee has made a determination whether or not are the low pass rates even a concern if we're not seeing a rise in consumer complaints that consumers are actually harmed, and we're not seeing that. So I think that first the committee would want to make the determination. Are these pass rates really a concern, or should we really focus and make sure that the existing exam is covering what they are doing in California through the occupational analysis and just start not focusing on the actual pass rates? But another part of it is doing that research to find out from those other states what their complaint pool looks like, and not only the number of complaints, but what those complaints are. So if they're really they didn't fit and adjust my lenses right, or the lenses were wrong, or is it they have a conviction from prior and so the complaint type goes up. So you really want to do that analysis too as far as the complaints and the consumer harm, I think, before making any of those policy decisions.
Anna, do you have any comments for that? I'm not trying to compare an optician to an optometrist. In the state of California, optometrists are required to have continuing education credits. And so, why? I'm just curious. Why is an optometrist required? And I'm not trying to say opticians are at their level either. But what is the justification for them? And they're doing 50 hours a year, or every 3 years, or do we have?
Biannually?
It is biannually. So there's a couple things. The short answer is the legislature has determined that in order for an optometrist to practice and to keep consumers safe, they need to maintain the continuing education for the practice. The legislature at the same time but the legislature also has determined that it's not needed to protect the consumer for this registration population. So the legislature made that determination that it's not needed. So if we want to change that, we would have to demonstrate why it is now needed. So, and maybe that's a conversation for the DOC to be able to make that argument for why it is needed.
If you're looking for the bar, sort of what is the bar? Yeah. To Jessica's point, the legislature's bar, it fluctuates. But if I'm thinking about all the professions that have CE requirement, it's a diagnosis and treatment. A lot of them diagnose and treat an ailment, and those types of diagnostic processes can change as disease sets change.
So that's what I've seen, just to provide that sort of experience. I'm thinking of almost everybody diagnoses or treats directly, so in the mouth or whatnot. So I'm sure, I don't, legal may know better.
I was have
A
to say
scope,
a lot.
yeah, because they're all actively treating or diagnosing.
So then opticians aren't doing any sort of they're just interpreting what the diagnosis is all about. Supporting it.
Supporting it, yeah.
That's what they're doing. They're not really.
That would be a chief differentiation, I think, from a legislative standpoint. So,
That's a clarification.
and I'm just speaking off the cuff.
No, that's fine. That's good. Any other thoughts?
I mean, just off, gut instinct is, yeah, it's good to continue your education if you're in the field. If you're going to be in that field, you should know what the current standards are. But that's not our task at hand. It's not what we are about. What is the consumer harm, right? So what if they are not getting that continuing education? Is there a harm to the consumer base? And I mean, I don't know if that there is.
Yeah, well,
Or is there?
that's one thing. Maybe going back to, maybe we already have it in our material somewhere, but like step one is you reference the complaint pool in other jurisdictions. It's like, what about the complaint pool here?
Right.
Like, what is going on that we're so concerned about? And is there a problem that we're trying to solve, or are we coming up with solutions where the problem doesn't even exist? And that gets to this movement of limiting regulations as barriers and that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Maybe the corporate side knows through settlements that somebody got the wrong glasses and got in a car accident, and that's real tangible, right? We can see how the screw up of an optician resulted in a harm.
Yeah.
My experience is that if there's any, and again, it's in the context of a optometry office with an optometric assistant, but if they ever do anything wrong, you just take it back and they fix it. If you say, if you don't think you're seeing right, you go back and they say, oh, maybe the focal point's in the wrong spot. And it's like, okay, come back on Saturday.
And I would tell you from just doing research and developing this, education for a lot of consumers do come back and they say there's a difference on who's attending us. That experienced optician who's probably doing more of the continued education, they're going to go seek them out first before they seek the one who has nothing. So, to your point, yes, they could go back and just get it
But
fixed.
in reality, they're not. I'll disagree. In reality, they're going to go to Costco and the internet now, more and more and more faster. That hits the bottom line, and if it doesn't work, they take it back and get it fixed. But that's just my instinct. But I'd like to know what the issues we're facing are, and it and it relates. Do these two tests even talk about the stuff we care about?
So I mean, I have an email, and I have an email of the top 5 from our enforcement staff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to take a 5-minute break, I can pull it up and we can go over the top 5. But what you're concerned about, the top 5 complaint types, and what you're concerned about as not, I don't know if it's in the top 5 or even, it might be on the very bottom. But I can pull it up if you want to take a quick break.
That's good.
I'll take a quick break.
Just okay.
I think people are more in favor of a quick break.
Okay.
Still on agenda item number 9.
So members, displayed is the public information that we have as far as disciplinary actions that we were that were taken. And from July 1, 2009 through August 15, 2007, you can see we've taken 27 total actions. By we, I mean us and the medical board, because they had done the majority of that time. One was for the dishonest act, failing to disclose a conviction on our application. Two were for failing to comply with citations for unregistered practice. One was for dispensing contact lenses without a prescription, fitting lenses without supervision, and failure to display registration certificate. The remainder were for convictions. So when it comes down to the harm for dispensing lenses incorrectly, not putting, fitting and adjusting correctly, it didn't rise to any accusation or consumer harm on that end. So if you have any questions, Ruby, you said you had some.
So none of actual doing the work. Just the
Other stuff.
regulation for violating the regulation. So how many other states, how many states don't regulate?
28.
So Ruby, you had some questions?
Yeah, I mean, because I look at, again, I guess because I'm getting the experience quite a bit about opticians being left behind, not getting, and that's why I go into new technology, not even understanding new lenses that are in the industry. How do you capture them? And there are a lot of good companies that do just keep giving that information to the opticians, and then there are private practices that have reps that come and give them that new information, but there's still a lot of learning gaps that we hear from the consumers, just on a one-to-one. Just comments, and believe it or not, I can agree. I got some spectacles 2 years ago, and they never worked. I put them in the drawer because they told me they used to. And I did them daily with consumers. I hope I'm not the only one. And that's why I think there's got to be a solution about the learning gaps for opticians. I mean, what would be, I think it's beneficial, even if they were required to take 2 hours or 1 hour a year. Not a lot. When you have the certificate of the ABO, you average it out to 4 hours a year to keep up that certificate. In California, we're not required to keep it up. It was just a minimum. And it may not have to be a continuing education. It could be something else. And something else we can think of. Maybe every 2 years, or every 3 years, why do you review this? And still keep it optional, but keep it in their pathway. Consider this. Even if it was just a consideration. That's what
And one thing I want to clarify too, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen or that you guys aren't receiving complaints. It could just be that they just don't come to us.
They don't.
So what I would request, and maybe we could do some more outreach with the registrants, that when they do receive those complaints, encourage them to file a complaint with us, because then we can take some action. Because we only see those that come to our attention. And another thing to point out is prior to 684, there was a requirement that they post for the RDOs, they post down there who to contact within the RDO for a complaint, not how to contact the board for a complaint. And so after 684 went into effect, that verbiage changed to require the consumer notice posting to contact the board. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but this is just the data that we have, because we can't go to the legislature and say we need this requirement because there's consumer protection, consumer harm happening, but we have no data to back anything up. So we need to demonstrate the consumer harm. That, I think that's the difficulty that the DOC is going to have.
Yeah, and then unless consumers know how to go about
Right.
it, you're not hearing it. You're really, and I hear it daily. I don't know why, but I do hear it daily, where they've gone to 2 different dispensaries, and then when we checked just yesterday, I just checked some spectacles, and I could see what was going on. Took it over to the doctor could see what was going on, and where he would correct it. But why, what was missed and why? And the consumer saying, yes, I don't understand why. Why can I not connect? They remade them for me 3 times, and I couldn't still see evidence. And we could see why.
So then do you, as a professional, do you recommend that they file a complaint with us?
No, I don't, because I'm not sure that that's the menu, but I would start now telling all the consumers, this is what you need to do now. Because I'm hearing it daily and more, I don't know why, honestly. But I could start telling consumers, okay, you said everything to me. Now here's a way you can go to the board and start complaining. Otherwise, I'm getting all complaints and I'm trying to see about a solution, and if the board doesn't get it, they're not going to. Why are they going to do anything different?
Is there an easy way to file a complaint? I won't ask about the website, but
Well, actually,
is there
let
a
me show you.
easy form that we can go to?
No, there's actually a button that says file complaint.
Okay.
Yeah. Here, I'll show you right now.
She knows it.
Look at this.
I mean, maybe if it
I mean, if you have internet.
Yeah. So you click on the Breeze website and you file a complaint. So here, and you could, where it said file, that's where you go to file a complaint.
For consumers.
For consumers, you file a complaint, go through the complaint process.
All right,
Yes.
come look, sir.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll send, and we'll see how it then continues on.
Do you know for the complaint about dispensing contact lenses without a prescription, what was the context of that?
So I don't know specifics, but when we get those complaints, it's because they're dispensing like the Plano contact lenses, or they're dispensing lenses on an expired prescription, so it's no longer a valid prescription. But I don't know the case-by-case specifics. But we get the Plano contact lenses quite a bit.
I was only asking just
Huh?
because.
Especially this time of year, right?
Right, especially during Halloween when they want those cosmetic contact lenses. There's some vendors who will dispense them without a prescription.
But in 7 years, at most, it was one
Right.
that we took action on.
That filed the complaint.
Can I actually ask a question on the Plano?
Yeah.
Where those complaints go, I know the Board of Optometry did a great job at education efforts. Were those complaints going to the medical board or going to you guys during that Plano period? This is
It was actually both. Medical board would get those and we would get them. Because we would have dual jurisdiction over that.
Yeah.
Us for them dispensing without the lenses, them they're dispensing without the registration. So
Okay.
we saw both.
I just think that's a low number for how much education, and I mean, you guys were very thorough in that process, so I was surprised to see that.
Well, and again, because this is disciplinary action,
Oh.
so if they were unregistered, it would have been citations.
Okay, that's helpful.
So this would have
this
been a
is
registrant
disciplinary.
who's dispensing the lenses without a prescription.
So this is
This
where
is
you took a
revoking
disciplinary
or
action.
suspension,
Correct.
suspending
Got
the
it.
license.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I for some
Right.
reason had the citations in my head, so
Yeah, so those are considered
Okay.
enforcement actions, not
that's a good
disciplinary actions.
clarification. Because I know.
Do you have a number for enforcement
No,
number?
I don't have that.
Perfect, thank you.
Do we know? I thought of an example. Do people who do ear piercing or tattoos need licenses?
Cosmetology, right?
No, tattoo artists are not regulated in California.
Or what about ear piercers?
I don't believe so either.
I don't think it's part of our
No.
Opening a can of worms.
But I mean, I think that's a valid point when you're looking at the potential for consumer harm, right? Is that the point of bringing
Yeah.
those up?
I think old needles or
Right. But what made me think of it is the people who are getting cited for selling the Plano lenses also sell T-shirts and maybe pierce ears, and you could buy a bong and other stuff like that.
Well, I mean, the Plano contact lenses, I think that is a consumer harm issue because a lot of them are being distributed from out of country. They're not FDA approved. They're mislabeled.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. And I'm just saying
Patients
that
have ripped their
it's
corneas
okay.
off, so.
And that might be a reason for having a whole regulatory regime, is just so there's a method to go after those.
Well, there is
those
with the
vendors.
optometry side. I mean, it is already exists.
Or it could just be made a specific crime.
Yeah.
Do we have any other
Discussion? So we don't really have any sort of recommendations or anything to the board about?
What I would like is some kind of guidance. So now that we've provided you some kind of research, where does the committee want to go from here? Are you thinking that you want to move with requiring continuing education, and if so, what information would you like us to bring back to you? Or are you recommending that we hold off on this whole conversation until the other top 10 go into effect? We just want some guidance on where the committee wants to go from here.
I'd like to start to see more of what you're talking about. You're talking about. You're still going to get some information to us.
As far as the complaint types from the other states?
Right.
Okay, we can do that. Is there any other information that you'd like to see before you're making the determination to add continuing education requirements or education requirements up front?
Yeah. I maybe would like to, we can do something different. It doesn't have to be, minimum hours of 20 hours a year or 4 hours a year. It doesn't have to be that. Maybe something every 2 years, something significant, some awareness of some education. Because time does go by and technology is changing. And there is a benefit to at least keep with current trends as to what's going on. It does help. I mean, just something very minimal. It could be, every 3 years you go do a workshop for an hour and figure out what's going on. And is that going to really set a barrier to them? And do it without perhaps setting a barrier. Make it an option or make it an encouragement. I don't know. It's something I'd be curious. Would that be too big of a challenge? Every 2 years or every 3 years, something like an hour workshop.
Or even like something instead of a workshop, you could, if it's like a online. If you're renewing, it's a renewal here, but also here's this workshop that, and it doesn't have to be a necessarily requirement, but at least it's showing up there as a thing.
Right.
For here's some new things that have happened in the field of this,
optician.
right. So at least providing them with the information, like new information, that it's not a requirement, but it's at least something that we're putting in front of them.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something.
So they can still get their license and their registration, all that.
Well, I mean, that's already an option now to them. I mean, just because we don't require it,
Right.
doesn't mean they don't do it. You know what I'm saying? So as far as the board is concerned, though, we have to set up what's required. So if you want it, then we would have to require it
Right.
through statute. And because what you're proposing, that's already an option, and maybe it's just better communication.
Maybe that's what. Maybe it is a communications element.
But I would say that that's maybe not a board function. That
Right.
would be on the educational programs that are out there to outreach to the consumer. Because our job is to set the minimum
Right.
requirements for practice.
Mm-hmm.
In other professions, the associations take that on.
Right.
So, but if you're talking about setting up a minimum standard,
Right.
you have to sort of clear those hurdles of consumer harm.
Yes.
Right, barriers to entry.
So one of the concerns about continuing education generally is there's often a wide range of things you can take the class on. And if it's on the latest in frame technology, in Italy, sponsored by a vendor.
I'm going first, I'm sorry.
I thought you were already there. I thought you were part of the welcome crew. And so, no, but there are plenty of ways you can get your hour or get your 2 hours, and it might not be so connected to what you do. When I was on the optometry board, there is an issue raised of, you should allow optometrists to get CE through the medical board. And it's like, well, and that makes sense for learning about diabetic connections and things like that. But one could imagine an optometrist going to Hawaii for the medical CE on, for an orthopedic doctor. And it's like, well, it's real CE, and so they get their 4 hours credit, but it really doesn't benefit the optometrist patient in any way. And so people can choose kind of whatever they want. My question is, are there examples of other boards in DCA that do any like program work, meaning like put together a 1 hour video module on the latest in their regulated industry, where my thought is that it's like, well, couldn't we just produce something like, here are the latest developments, and force people to watch it when they renew their thing, and then they'll get 45 minutes or an hour of, I think we did defensive driving for the state, right? Mm-hmm. I did it for my city job too. But there are plenty of ways to do these online things where you answer a question every 5 minutes. Right. And at least it's something. It turns out for traffic school and driving, it's pretty good, because it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's a good refresher.
But that comes back to consumer safety. That's part of the job. That's
right.
What I'm
So
trying to figure out
the idea, if instead of we could tell people, if your concern is what are the latest developments and the changes, whatever, maybe there could just be a general discussion provided to people, and that might be more useful than a 4 hour a year CE requirement, which we don't really have control over the content so much of that, because you could, anyway.
I think when it comes to spectacle lens dispenser, they are probably a little safer, because yes, consumer come back and they just have it redone. When it comes to the NCLE and the technician who's working directly with the patient and fitting them for contacts, maybe there is a risk there. Because they're doing a lot more of what the doctor is doing. They're fitting them for contacts.
Right, but if there have been changes in fitting technology, then it could just be a bulletin on the website. Attention opticians. The University of Michigan has come up with an alternative way to fitting contacts. See their website.
So I would be very concerned and caution the board being the one to advertise any kind of new technology. One, it might not be the standard of care. We could be advertising for this company and not this company. I think that's very, very. I would caution you to do that. I think that's on whoever's doing the new technology, the industry. If the industry is doing that, I would be concerned with the board doing that advertising.
No, what you say makes sense. Doesn't for the industry, don't they? These technology people wine and dine you, like you got to go to a dinner and use. That's how the pharmacists do it.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical industry, but it seems, but you're right. That's how the education happens. Is the people who want you to use their device or whatever, they do. I've read about this. I've seen the TV shows that they go. You got a fancy dinner out of it. Maybe even a golf trip.
Sometimes tacos, just tacos. But yeah.
That would be fancy to some of us.
And is there a possibility? I mean, there are states that require it. Is there a possibility to get some of their reasoning? Why are they requiring it in their states?
So continuing education?
Yeah.
We can reach out to them and find out the
Why?
origins of the requirements.
Why are they doing
Yeah.
it? Because obviously they do see some reason for it.
Yeah.
And yes, I think industry partners do a lot of good. They do reach out, like you're mentioning, the advertising. They do that.
And then would this be something we put on our legislative agenda to seek the, like the CE requirements for the others comes through statute, is what you explained. So then we would propose this, well, the board would possibly put it on their legislative campaign, and maybe somebody would sponsor it and carry it for them.
You would have to be through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be challenging, but
That's true.
And even if you were to get an offer and it goes through the legislature, it's still on the governor to sign and veto. And he's vetoed when it comes to continuing education. He's made very clear where he stands on it. It was a few years back where I think it was the county was trying to add a couple hours of CE, and he vetoed it. And it was a pretty clear, concise statement.
And what did it say?
with whatever
Yeah.
package when this comes up, if you could provide that statement,
It was.
and that'll inform us. Because it may be after reading that, I just say,
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about this for 2 years, because
So that's good. That's
we
good
could have
to-
already been having lunch.
I really appreciate we had this discussion. I really do. Because we need this. So is there any public comment?
No comment. No comment.
No, I really do appreciate the discussion. Because
I mean, it feels like the gut instinct for everyone is, yes, you should have more education, but that's not what we are tasked with, is the problem, right?
And it was the gist of the comment from the governor, is that it's on the industry to maintain their own level of education, not on the regulatory boards, but I'll provide that statement
Yeah,
so you guys
that'd be
can see it.
great.
all right. So any further discussion? Yeah, so we're just gonna wait for that to
Yeah.
be done. Okay. Well, now our last agenda, any future agenda items that anyone would like to recommend at this time? We are on schedule with what we have, which is really good, but do you have any future agenda items you'd like to have?
I think what we had set up previously seems to be, we're working through the things that we wanted to tackle, and I feel like we're accomplishing that.
Right. Is there a heads up on anything new from our list that will be on the November agenda?
Not on me, but I can provide it.
Just not.
So, do we call it a meeting?
Yes?
I move we adjourn.